Hello, and welcome to the TerraLex Insights Podcast, where our goal is to present multicultural perspectives by leading professionals. These perspectives on contemporary issues will help lawyers and business people work better together. And I'm your host, Terri Pepper, and I am TerraLex's CEO. Happy to have everyone join us today, where we're talking with Noelia Amoedo, and she is a prominent entrepreneur and expert in digital technology with a unique blend of strategic vision, technical expertise, and human values. And when we get into talking, I think I'm going to ask Noelia to discuss her educational background, which is highly impressive. But she has a very particular focus in her consulting and expertise that I find especially fascinating, which is human-centric AI. Very timely topic. Noelia is a Fulbright scholar with an impressive educational and business pedigree, and she leads Nodium, I hope I said that correctly,
yes.
Nodium, an advisory firm with a clear vision. And her vision is that a world where companies use innovative technology to help humans and society thrive and become more successful for it. So welcome to the podcast, Noelia. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Terri. The pleasure is all mine.
And you're joining us today from Spain, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay. I know you
I'm back in Spain.
Yes.
Not even in Spain. I'm actually today back in almost my hometown,
Oh, okay, great. Well,
yeah.
Glad to be back home.
Back to the roots.
Yes, there you go. So let's, as a starting point, help our listeners really understand a little more about what your credentials that you're bringing to this table, because they really are impressive. So tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to your current consulting focus.
Sure. Well, I guess prior to starting Nodium, which you pronounced right, and it's just a play in my name, I had about 25 years of experience in the digital technology world. I did my master's here in Spain in physics, optoelectronics, and then I went to do a master's at Stanford on electrical engineering and entrepreneurship. And I guess that put me right in the path of the startup world. Mm-hmm. And I was very lucky to be at the forefront of many technological innovations, right? I was there 99 with digital payments. Then I moved to mobile in 2000. Then, well, all of these traveled around the world, did business across, I heard you mention multicultural. So,
yes,
worked across the world on all of this. Then I was part of one of the first social networks in 2008, then moved to create an app ecosystem in 2009. And eventually in 2012, I started my own company, which was VC-backed back in Spain then, although it was a very international company. And we created a platform where we used big data and AI to try and make the digital advertising world a lot more efficient, right? And contributed to create what it's called programmatic advertising today. I did sell my company 1 week before the lockdown here in Spain,
wow.
Which was very timely.
Yeah.
And then I committed to staying with a group that acquired us, which was a group in Asia, for another 4 years. I continued to manage MediaSmart then with a much bigger international team across mostly emerging markets. I also got involved in M&A, became part of the board of several companies within the group, including the one that is still publicly traded in India. And really the only other thing that I could do for the time that I was running MediaSmart, because there was not much time for anything else, was working with the Aspen Institute in Spain, which really got me to think a lot about the impact of digital technologies in all aspects of society, right? So by the time I got to the end of my commitment with MediaSmart and Apple, the company that bought us, that coincided with the boom of the new wave of AI, generative AI. It also coincided with my daughter being a teenager and me having continuous fights to keep her off the screens and off Instagram. And, as I thought what to do next, I couldn't help but see sort of generative AI having great potential, but also great potential to amplify more a lot of the problems that we hadn't yet solved with digital technologies. And I decided to sort of become an agent of change, or try to focus my energy in ensuring we don't make the same mistakes, and we use AI in its new, more powerful form as much as possible to help people solve problems that are worth solving, right? And that's where all of my projects, including the consulting fit.
I don't think I've been to a conference, no matter who sponsored it, including our TerraLex conferences in the last 2 years, where there weren't several AI-related topics on the agenda. And the one thing I feel in the room every time is complete fear from organizations about how overwhelming and how scary on just so many different dimensions. And this intersection of technology and humans is really challenging, I would say, for our world, especially for law firms, where human capital and the billable hour are what drive the firms. And so they're very much struggling with those kinds of things. So this intersection of technology and human coming together, share a little bit about some of your philosophies and approaches to this issue, just sort of big picture type of things.
Sure. First, I mean, just to on the fear, I sometimes wonder, technologies, and especially the ones that are sort of revolutionary, they always still instill fear, right? And in some of my public speaking, actually, we go back to Socrates and how scared he was of writing, right? So that fear is sort of normal when something is changing very fast. But I think, just to set the context, and then I'll go into my philosophies, that the new wave of AI is different from what we've seen before in a number of ways. Not to say that fear is justified. Fear, I think, and panic is never the right attitude. So we need to change that. And I'll go back to my philosophies. But one thing that is unprecedented is the rate of adoption, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, ChatGPT got to 100 million users in 2 months. Now they must be at about, I think that last I read was 800 million users active users every week. So that's a lot. But other tools like Lovable, which allows anybody to code via natural language, they got to 100 million ARR in like 8 months. I mean, these tools are adopted left and right. And, one is because we can talk to them in our language. We can interact in our language. So there's no skill barrier to use them. And two, they do make us feel a lot more productive in the short term, right? So who's not going to want to be more productive? So that's one thing that makes it different. The second thing that creates also a lot of that anxiety and that fear is that both the AI and its outcomes are often difficult to tell apart from humans, right? And that is something new we have to deal with. And it's not sometimes, and it evolves very quickly, right? We may say now we're able to tell the difference, but
not really. But it is a game that people are playing all day long. Oh, that's AI.
And the problem is all these tools are being given to the world without the guardrails being in place, right? I mean, it would be much easier if cameras that took an image of the real world, sign it, and we can tell, or some technology can tell that they are a video or an image of the real world, but we're not there yet, right? So these is also creating the anxiety and the fear. And then the third is just the speed, right? Because for me, for a living, I need to stay up to date with all the latest news. And if it's difficult for me to stay up to date, because every day there's something new, some new model, some new architecture that is going to make things possible that we didn't think were possible yesterday, right? I mean, it's super overwhelming for everybody, right? So it's normal. And it's also, there are things, related to this technology that are sort of different. So I don't feel comfortable either saying, this is normal. We've always been scared before. Let's not just do anything, right? But then when it comes to my philosophies to deal with this, both, for organizations and individuals, but obviously a lot of this is part of my consultancy, is one, I often go back to basics. It helps with the FOMO, so it's very practical to get out of that fear. But it's really often about asking oneself the right question, or the right questions in general, and that's what strategy is about, right? In the first place, where are you? Where do you want to go? How do you get there? So going back to that often helps, and it's really, a lot of the fears that we were describing are often feel like existential, right? And we are going through sort of an existential crisis, and I like to see AI and the hype that comes with it as an opportunity, sort of in a similar way to an existential crisis, to ask ourselves the right questions that are often very basic, right? But what's the point? Why do we do what we do? What is our purpose? And that is a very useful exercise that we can do both as individuals and as organizations, to make the most out of that fear or that anxiety or that existential crisis we're going through, right? And crisis is a positive word, right? It stands for change, or it comes etymologically from change, turning point. So if we can make the most out of this to turn it into what maybe could have been earlier, but AI now makes us realize, things just because the change is more dramatic. So that is one that I use. Then second, the human-centric approach, the focus on people, is really important for me, and not only as an ethical principle, which also, I want the human species to continue to evolve and for people to grow. But I also honestly think it's the practical thing to do for companies, right? To minimize those risks and maximize the potential especially in a moment in time where there is so much uncertainty. And that brings me to the third important point in my philosophy, and also very useful in my consulting practice, which is the realization of the uncertainty and the fact that we can't control. We're in an unpredictable environment. We were talking about me being in the Silicon Valley, 25 years ago. That when the internet was starting, we thought the internet was accessing, content and services through a browser on a laptop, right? The fact that we would develop digital personalities, that we would be able to communicate with our fridge, or that we would have internet in our car, not even in our pocket, that like didn't occur to us, right? And I feel we're sort of at the same place. When it comes to this new wave of AI, exactly, and also in the world as a whole, right? So understanding that we don't know, and that everything is changing, and that we cannot control it, is very important. That complexity, and I draw a lot from complex adaptive systems and use their frameworks actually in my consulting. But that complexity is not an excuse for inaction, but actually realizing all that complexity and using the right tools where you recognize, I don't have control, but I can influence the present with the information I have, and I need to sense whether things are going in the right direction. that gives you a lot of agency, right?
The whole thing is so fascinating. Recently, I wouldn't have thought of this being another complexity that maybe businesses need to think about, but there was a lot of stuff recently here in the US, probably everywhere, in which ChatGPT changed their algorithm to make the replies more formal and less friendly. And some people, turns out, are having personal relationships and treating their versions of ChatGPT as if it's their friend. One had gotten engaged to her ChatGPT. One was using theirs as a therapist, and these people are, having existential crises themselves because they no longer have their friends. So it's interesting to think about the things that a company has to consider, not beyond what our wildest imagination would have been. So I know that you do work a lot with companies on developing their AI strategies that include this human concern and component. What are some of the key ingredients when you go into a client? What are some of the key ingredients for them to develop a successful strategy? And maybe on the flip side of that also, what are some of the common sort of pitfalls that you see, things that go wrong in companies that are trying to have a human-centric AI policy or approach?
Well, I find very few companies that want to have a human-centric AI approach. Most of them just want to see how technology can, or this new technology can make them more efficient, can help them sell more and save costs, right? So that's usually what you find in companies. And again, that's another example of starting with the wrong question. Because if you start with the question, how can I be more efficient? It's easy to go down the line of saving costs, and then that may be replacing people with AI, right? But even some other organizations, because sometimes I advise other types of organizations, that university would surprise you also. In that case, for example, I see them often starting with the high principles of human-centric AI, right? But then, it quickly goes from the high-level principles, very philosophical and very human-centric, to execution. And then we go into pilots and how can we be more effective and how can we save costs. And so it's interesting. I think, let me start with the pitfalls, and then we can talk more about what I think are the key ingredients, and some are the opposite of the others, right? So the main problem I see today, and it's the most common narrative actually, is seeing AI as automation, right? So even when you start with the high principles, then when you go into execution mode, it's often, okay, let me ask our team or each function or each person, and this is often part of the training, which are the repetitive tasks that AI or technology can help you with, right? And that comes straight from seeing AI as automation, right? And that is a very, very limiting view. And again, it sets you in a limited course for many reasons. One, again, we're talking about technology that, because of all the things we discussed earlier, is going to create big tectonic shifts, right? So again, we need to think of systems, and everything is changing at once, right? So you may find yourself very busy and very proud of yourself, especially when you go and look at the ROI of each initiative, but find that you're automating and getting a great return on investment on a task that is not going to be relevant in the future, right? Or you may find yourself being very effective at making that particular task more efficient, but not solving the problem. Let me give you an example, because and it's often easy to understand. let's talk about university or an education institution, right? And many of us have kids, and it's easy to follow. Let's say we go to the teachers and we ask them this question. Okay, how can or what are the repetitive tasks that AI could help with, so that, and that's the thing that usually follows, so that you can focus on higher level tasks, right? I mean, that's the usual.
We hear all the time.
Right? So I could answer as a teacher, well, grading. I have to go through the exams, and, I can spend 100 hours, grading, I don't know, 200, I have no idea how long it takes to grade, but, like I can spend the whole weekend grading the papers of my class or the exams. Now AI could help with that, and I could grade all those exams in, minutes, right? Or if I want to review, maybe in an hour as opposed to the whole weekend, right? But I mean, that may make me very efficient at that task. But, if the kids are actually having AI or actually write their essays or do their exams, right?
Like, AI.
Right. I'm being very efficient at what? Like, am I solving? And we go back to what I was saying at the beginning of going back to the basics, right? Of what am I actually trying to achieve? And that's why strategy is important. And asking ourselves as organizations those questions are important, because again, when you see AI as automation, I go and automate, I don't have to think about any higher level questions. Often I just tell my technical team to just go and get the info and automate. And that may make us, completely lose the plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the reasons why seeing AI as automation is not a good thing. But another reason is often when we think about automation, we may find ourselves automating tasks or processes where we actually gain value, both as companies and as individuals, right? So, when you ask people what task could we help you or what process could we help you automate, they may want to automate things that are hard, that just take time, right? But, there's a lot you gain, as we all know, in the process. And we as individuals and as organizations need to process certain things.
Well, even for no other reason than training. Even how do you learn if
yeah, exactly. It's through that effort you develop, and then you connect dots. There's with a drive to immediate productivity, there's a lot of a big pull to depending on these tools, and if you don't use them the right way, and if you over depend on them, then the machine will connect the dots, your brain won't, right? And there's a lot that we have in our brain. 80% of what goes on in it is even unconscious, right? So lots of very critical to continue to develop our brain. So you don't want to, automation may drive you through that path. And then third, but not least important, is that often when we have this more powerful technology that can help us with automation, we can even drive some of the current processes we have to be done with this more powerful software, as opposed to older software that we had, without realizing that we're, again, driving all these processes into, again, the complex realm, because this new software is not predictable, it's empirical, it's not deterministic. So we may be creating complexity, which again, by itself is not a problem, as long as we're ready to deal with it with the proper frameworks, right? So the moment you give processes to this, to AI, then we need to ensure you monitor, because it's not gonna behave the same as it was originally trained forever, right? It keeps changing, it keeps adapting. So that can create a lot of complexity, which often, when we're driven to automate, and now all this technology is key, we miss or we don't think about, right? So you end up not solving the right problem, not making your team more resilient and end up with a lot more complexity and more technology to solve that complexity, which doesn't lead to a good place, right? So that's a very big one. And then there's the whole culture one, but we can talk about that next. Seeing AI as a technical problem when it's a people.
Right. Well, and it's the question I was going to throw in, which may take you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I saw an article the other day that we might only be 5 years away from the singularity. And that gap is closing every day, where AI surpasses us in its sort of understanding and complexity. So we don't have a big window to potentially to get this right and under our control to where we're not being overtaken. I don't know if that's a real concern or not, but those kind of articles scare me.
Yeah. And there is obviously now, first was the chats, then the agents, and now the narrative is who's going to get to AGI first, right? It's artificial general intelligence, which is possibly what you refer to also when you say singularity, right? When AI is going to be smarter than us in everything. And well, first of all, I think there's, narratives often, particularly the one on AGI and how AGI is defined, respond to economic powers and a lot more things that also complex and not necessarily the reality. But also I try not to be scared, but try to be prepared for a world. And again, it's what I do with companies also, where we continue to develop ourselves in the use of the tools, right? So often, again, I don't think technology is good or bad. It depends on how you use it. But we do need to look at who does technology empower? And that I think is a much more powerful question, right? Yeah. And you can take it to a macroeconomic level, right? And you can take it to your individual level also, as an individual again, or as a company, right? So it's important to use AI, I think, in general, because it's part of our new world, and it's important to understand it, and it's important to develop intuition. And again, that's why, as part of my strategy, I help companies approach this as a culture or a transformation of your culture type of thing, as opposed to just the technical implementation of the AI. You need to have your organizational strategy together with your technical strategy. But then also make sure it empowers you also, right?
Well, and that is the last question I was going to ask you to talk about, is how can an organization empower people, especially given that, AI is perceived as threatening. In a law firm setting is a great example where it's replacing the billable hour, which has been the worth of the individuals for as long as I can remember.
Yep. 3 things there, and I'll let me close with that case, because that you're making me think. I've dealt a lot with fear of adoption, but more for I'm afraid that AI is going to replace me, but not the billable hours. So, but let me answer generically first, and then come to that specific example. I think that 3 things a company can do is, again, first, be strategic. I mean, it's don't go straight to implementing the use cases, okay? And be strategic. Ask yourself the basic but important questions. And again, a strategy doesn't have to be, actually, it shouldn't be a map, right? For a strategy, you need to ask yourself where I am, which is, again, another thing that companies miss. Where am I? Where do I want to go? And how do I get there? And your strategy should serve as a compass, right? Which is also important in an ever-changing world, right? And you want your strategy to serve as a guide for everyone within your organization, to navigate, right? So
Right.
it's important. But transparency is key. I think transparency
Agree.
with your employees and with your clients. Transparency about how to use AI, but transparency also about the fact that there are so many things that we don't know because nobody does, right?
Right.
But I think with transparency, you build trust, and trust is a must. I think in all of our organizations and in the relations with our clients, and something very complex as well, right? A little variation in trust can have a huge effect, and it's something that is very difficult to build and very easy to destroy, right?
Yes.
And the third thing is AI literacy, of course. But AI, I see also a lot of AI literacy understood as how to use the tools that we have today, like how to write the best prompts. And again, obviously you have all these big companies that are teaching you how to use their tools, right? When I talk about AI literacy, it is not about that. It is more about understanding conceptually how AI is different because of all the things we were talking about, and how to best use it, again, to empower yourself and to grow where you want to grow, right? And to continue to build value for yourself and therefore for your organization. So how to use it is key, but also how at a high level to understand it, and it's important to train your organization or to build a culture where you basically learn to deal with all this continuous change that is going to keep coming at us, faster and faster, right? Because it's not just the tools today. You want to prepare your organization to be resilient and to thrive through all this change. And I go back to people being at the center of that, because that's my experience. I mean, the way I've managed to, as a company, survive through cycles of ups and downs and companies going bankrupt left and right has been through building a resilient team, right? That uses that innovation as it appears with what we don't know, but they're going to be ready to see it when it comes and innovate, right? So those are the three elements. I would say
for the law firms where it's not just adapting and understanding and having literacy. It is literally going to have to be a change in how the organization derives value. And so that's an interesting.
And I would ask the questions, but about the problem of the billable hours, right? I think the way I see it as an outsider and having paid a lot of money to lawyers is the current system or the current, model of billing per hour. You could see it as sort of supporting the right or offering the right incentives. In a sense, the longer I take to do something, the more I'm paid, right? So you could think that the model is sort of incentivizing inefficiency, right? So then I guess the balance is achieved because more or less we know what it would take to, finish a contract, or, and of course, if you take too long, then you're going to be below the average. So you're just lacking and you're not doing your job, right? But it's, I wonder how much that problem was already there.
It's been there as long as I can remember.
But again, I think what AI does often is because it changes things so drastically, it makes certain things that were already there that may not have been already working, or may not have been, the best way of doing things. Now, all of a sudden, we're questioning. But I wonder how these happened before, right? Like when lawyers went from having to type in a typewriter their contracts from scratch to using templates that were digitalized in a computer. It took them less time to do things than before, but sort of those averages were adapting, right? So I wonder whether the same thing, when everybody is using AI tools, then they will take less time to do the things that they used to do, and clients will expect that, oh, I'm going to get more from these hour of a lawyer, right? Assuming that it doesn't take you more to review than to, that's
Right. Exactly.
but it will slightly adapt, and then all the expectations and the averages will have changed, right? The question is, I wonder whether there is an opportunity to actually wonder, is this the best way to price our services? Maybe not. And it's an opportunity to review that.
Yeah, this conversation, I've been in the legal industry since the late 1980s, and this conversation's been in place, not about AI, but the conversation about the law firm model and whether the billable hour is the best thing. And there's been pressure on it, and there's been prognostications over the years that billable hour is dying, and it never dies. But I think with AI coming to play, it is really causing a more rapid evaluation of the business model. So I think that's where the anxiety and the need for change coming in. So, but you're right. It's what's fascinating is I remember talking to lawyers from like that were in the heyday of their practice in the 1930s, 1940s, even 1950s. They didn't charge by a billable hour back then. They would evaluate the value to the client of the matter.
Exactly.
And just weigh a cost on that. I remember one lawyer who was a very prominent lawyer in the 40s telling me he would pick up the file at the end of the matter and weigh it in his hand and go, that feels like about a $2,000 fee. And that's what he would charge the client. And there was such a high level of trust, the client would pay it because they knew that that's the value that they had. If he said that was the value, that was the value.
Yeah, you're mentioning trust again. I was just in a conversation the other day when somebody mentioned, like in this, it was a conversation about future of work and, which jobs will exist or which jobs are subject to be automated by AI and whatnot. And he mentioned notaries, for example, as a clear example of these is a clear type of job that will be automated. And I thought about notaries in Spain, right? Which I think it's slightly different in the US.
But the US, yeah.
Right. But in you go to the notary, and certifies that every party is who they say they are, that they have both understood, provides legal guarantee, and this guy was in Spain, right? So he was thinking about notaries in Spain. So I was like, I always ask myself the question when being part of these conversations of AI, if it's so ripe for automation by AI, why has it not been automated before, right? Because a lot of the technology required to certify, to ensure, that was already there, right? So there are other elements that we are misjudging. Right? We're thinking, and again, I'm the first one to do this coming from technology, right? Like, technology, but technology, even a different form of technology, has been able to do this before. There are other reasons that often have to do with, things like trust or nuance or accountability in the whole system. So it takes really understanding what's going on as part of the job and the system to really determine how much can it be automated, and then whether the new wave of AI can automate in a more effective way, right? But
interesting stuff. Yeah. We are coming to the end of our time. And Noelia, I'm going to ask you to stay in the studio even when we're done, but I wanted to just take a moment to thank you on behalf of TerraLex. It's a topic I wish we had all day to discuss because there's so many nuances and pieces to it. I know we continue to unpack at our meetings, our global meetings, and et cetera, in different kinds of sessions. We have one coming up at our upcoming global meeting in November in Bangkok, where we're going to be talking about how law firms price for AI. There's just so many different dimensions, but more to come in the future. Thank you so much for joining us on the TerraLex Insights podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you as our guest.
Thank you so much, Terri.